Hi, my name is Bethany Travers, Health Communications Coordinator with the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment. Earlier today, myself and Sean O'Brien, Director of the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment, made the following presentation to the Barnstable County Commissioners at their weekly meeting. To view the meeting unedited and in its entirety, please visit our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/user/Barnstable County. This presentation represents the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment's assessment of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's draft review entitled Sole Source Aquifer Project Review of the Multipurpose Machine Gun Range proposed by the Massachusetts Army National Guard to be constructed at Joint Base Cape Cod. The Massachusetts Army National Guard is proposing to construct a multi-purpose machine gun range at Joint Base Cape Cod to train and qualify soldiers in use of automatic machine guns. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, per the Safe Drinking Water Act, conducted an exhaustive assessment of the potential environmental and public health impacts of the machine gun range to Cape Cod sole source aquifer. EPA concluded that the proposed project may present a significant public health hazard based on the volume of potential contaminants that would be released to the environment, specifically in relation to the sole source aquifer. On the right-hand side of your screen is an image of Joint Base Cape Cod and the location of the proposed machine gun range, which is outlined in red. It encompasses a smaller area outlined in black that represents a now inactive shooting range on the base. Cape Cod sole source aquifer plays a central role in the conversation about the proposed machine gun range. It is the only source of drinking water to our region, hence the term sole source. The Cape Cod aquifer is glacial in origin and composed of highly permeable soils such as sand and gravel, which makes it susceptible to contamination. Any area designated as a sole source aquifer is protected by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency under Section 1424E of the Safe Drinking Water Act of 1974. The Cape Cod aquifer is divided into 6 recharge areas or lenses. The groundwater in the area of Camp Edwards on Joint Base Cape Cod has been designated as the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve, which is part of the Sagamore Lens. It is protected under Chapter 47 of the Massachusetts Acts of 2002. The proposed machine gun range would be located over the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve and the Sagamore Lens, the most productive part of the Cape Cod aquifer. Groundwater in the area of Joint Base Cape Cod provides approximately 3 million gallons of drinking water per day to 12 community public water supply systems in the towns of Sandwich, Bourne, Falmouth, Mashpee, and the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. The Massachusetts Army National Guard is proposing a multi-purpose machine gun range at Camp Edwards on Joint Base Cape Cod to efficiently attain small arms training and weapons qualification requirements within the state of Massachusetts, thereby eliminating extensive out-of-state travel and the associated expense. Phase 1 of the proposed range, which is addressed by this EPA report, would consist of 8 firing lanes spanning 138 acres within the Upper Cape Water Supply Reserve. The graphic on the right-hand side of the slide shows what we call Zone 2 wellhead protection areas. These are the protected areas of an aquifer that discharge to a public water supply. There are 7 Zone 2s located within 1,000 feet down gradient of the proposed machine gun range. This includes 21 public wells supplying drinking water to Bourne, Falmouth, and Sandwich. It's approximated that 1.3 million bullets will be fired per year at the machine gun range, resulting in an almost 400% increase in the total number of bullets to be used annually across all ranges at Joint Base Cape Cod. Only copper ammunition would be used at the proposed range, so no lead ammunition would be fired. Potential sources of contamination include compounds related to propellants and residues deposited on the soil surface in the vicinity of the firing lines, as well as bullet casings and fragments deposited onto the soil surface. So, how does a machine gun range cause groundwater contamination? You have The person discharging the bullets and the primer residues and casings fall onto the ground, and then the bullets themselves and bullet fragments lodge into the soil of the backstop berm. Over time, if these waste products of the firing process are not removed, the compounds that make up the bullets, such as antimony, chromium, copper, lead, manganese, and nitroglycerin, slowly leach into the soil and the groundwater below. Again, it's estimated that 1.3 million bullets per year would be deposited onto the soil on the range. And there's a quote from the EPA draft assessment, which we find particularly impactful, which is that assuming a 50-year time frame under proposed annual loading and assuming limited range mitigation, there could be more than 275 tons of bullet components released to the environment. And it's important to point out that the proposed machine gun range is expected to be operational from anywhere between 50 and 100 years. So, the water quality monitoring data from the inactive firing range on Joint Base Cape Cod was used to provide baseline contaminant conditions for soil and groundwater in this assessment. The inactive range is the central location for the new proposed machine gun range. So, the water quality findings showed the presence of contaminants including antimony, chromium, copper, lead, and manganese, which I mentioned on the previous slide. And while these existing releases are actively and effectively managed, there's concern about what we call the cumulative impacts. So, additional releases by the proposed range, which would greatly increase mass loading of contaminants and therefore compound the existing problem. Potential public health risks associated with exposure to drinking water with these contaminants at levels above health based benchmarks include anything from increased cholesterol to allergic dermatitis, gastrointestinal distress, headaches, dizziness, lightheadedness, tremors. Confusion to physical and neurological developmental delays in children and neurological effects. And an important environmental impact of nitroglycerin contamination is that nitroglycerin can break down into nitrates and nitrites in the soil. And those are important emerging contaminants of concern here on Cape Cod in terms of environmental health. The EPA report pointed out that more than $1.4 billion in resources have already been spent on groundwater remediation at Joint Base Cape Cod. So the concern is that adding another significant contaminant source to the aquifer while previous mitigation is underway would negate ongoing groundwater restoration work. Additional unresolved major concerns include a lack of commitment by the Army National Guard for regular bullet retrieval, inadequate media monitoring, and some quality control issues pertaining to past monitoring, and insufficient best management practices to minimize the release of contaminants to the maximum extent feasible. It's also uncertain that any combination of operations, maintenance, and monitoring practices can adequately reduce potential contamination to the aquifer so as to eliminate the threat of a significant public health hazard. And finally, it has been determined that the proposed project does not sufficiently address environmental justice implications, climate change factors, and a lack of environmental benefits from this proposed range. The mission of the Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment is to promote a healthy Cape Cod community through disease prevention and control, health and safety education, environmental protection, and emergency preparedness. As such, we support the findings and recommendations put forth by the EPA that the proposed machine gun range at Joint Base Cape Cod presents a significant hazard to Cape Cod sole source aquifer and therefore public health. The public engagement process for the EPA's draft review is currently ongoing, and it is 60 days. It ends on June 26, 2023. During this time, the public and interested stakeholders can submit written comments for EPA's consideration, and there's the email address listed here on this slide. EPA will also hold a public hearing to receive oral comments, and that will be held on May 24th, 2023 at 7 o'clock p.m. at the Center for Active Living in Sandwich. And that concludes our presentation on the EPA's assessment of the machine gun range at Joint Base Cape Cod. Thank you so much for listening.